Welcome to Conversations on the Coast, San Francisco's premier author interview program. And today our guest is someone who, in the advertisement for this program, the spot, we said, is an author that we've had on more times than any other author because he's the funniest author we've ever had. So you all know we must be speaking of Calvin Trillin, who's here to talk about a new book called A Heckuva Job, More of the Bush Administration in Rhyme, published by Random House. Thanks for being here again.
Good to be here, Jim.
You know, and I like to examine these slight books carefully and see what I can mine that perhaps you didn't think of. Books of poetry or verse rarely do this, but A Heckuva Job is immediately revealing two traits of the author. The first one is that the author is helpful. On the very back jacket, before you open this book, you provide a gloss, if you will, further words from George W. Bush after he said to FEMA Chief Michael Brown, "Brownie, you're doing a heck of a job." What did Bush add to that?
A qualified guy, I wish I had added. Your resume's super, even if padded. We wanted the best to lead FEMA's forces, and who would know more than a man who knows horses? He saw that the storm was more than some showers and sent off a memo in 4 or 5 hours. You found out the life in the dome was not super, and only a day after Anderson Cooper. A heck of a job. You know how to lead 'em. We hope to award you the Medal of Freedom.
See, and that's a more, fulsome, revealing statement than the president perhaps had time for.
I try to help whenever I can, Jim.
Now that's what one might call your nice side.
Or my even nicer side.
Even nicer side. Now, there's another side of you that I don't know exactly what to call it, perhaps nasty, because in the very front of the book, you put down a gentleman by the name of Abe Trillin. You say the book is in memory of him, and then you go on to say, whose fondness for rhyme and disdain for meter led him to write such couplets as, "Eat your food gently," said Mom to little son Roddy. "If you don't, I will break every bone in your body."
Well, I didn't think of that as a put-down exactly. I mean, he's just not interested in meter. That was my father, and he used to put a couplet on the menu every lunchtime in a restaurant that he had, and they were usually about pie. This one
pie?
didn't. Yeah.
No.
I think his shortest was "Don't sigh, eat pie." So you might say I'm a second-generation poet.
That's quite good. The thing about what he wrote is that it's quite forceful, and I think would get results.
Absolutely.
I mean, a kid doesn't want every bone in his body broken.
Absolutely. That was.
I think Roddy ate whatever was there.
Yeah, I think one of my father's other poems, he rhymed pie with a lot. He wrote one that was, "All right, Warden, I'm ready to fry. I've had my last piece of Mrs. Trillin's pie."
Ready? Yes, ready.
Yeah.
The other thing about this book is that it's really clear that George W. Bush, our president, inspires these flights of poetry.
Oh, definitely. He's
kind of like your muse almost.
Yeah, I really think of my muse in some ways as John Sununu, the chief of staff for the elder George Bush.
Yes, I remember that.
And a man who was very interested in being considered the smartest man in the room. And I loved his name, Sununu, and eventually wrote a poem called "If You Knew What Sanu Knew," and that was the first poem I wrote in the nation. That was the
very first.
That was the beginning of my career, if that's the word, as a deadline poet.
John, and you owe it all, in a sense.
I owe it all to John Sununu. I think it's fair to say I'm the only person who was ever inspired to poetry by John Sununu.
That's probably a safe assumption, I would think. He's inspired. Never mind. I don't want to think of what else he might have inspired. The other thing is that this George W. Bush, who was a kind of a muse, is also part of what's going on right now in your mind and your life, because he makes you yearn for administrations past.
Yeah, that's been true generally with me, is that each administration makes me a bit nostalgic for the administration that preceded it. But in this case, perhaps because of the family connection, I think back with some nostalgia about George H.W. Bush's administration and wonder how I could have said unkind things about people like Brent Scowcroft, the intermittently dozing national security advisor, and Lawrence Eagleburger, who had 3 sons, named them all Lawrence. I now think of him as a compadre. I think of him as my homie and my ally compared to this crowd.
As political observation, a heck of a job, proves again how astute Calvin Trillin is, but he's also highly original. We're going to check that out when we return.
You're listening to Conversations on the Coast with Jim Foster. Now you can find this program on iTunes, SoundCloud, and all your favorite digital outlets. Follow the show on Twitter at JimFosterCoc and email jimfostercoc@gmail.com.
A heck of a job. More of the Bush administration in rhyme. That's the title of the book. The author, of course, is Calvin Trillin. The publisher is Random House. And I've heard you called many things, but in reflecting upon your life here as a poet, I think of you as Calvin the Original. You're the first person I know of, and the only one so far, to try to bring down a president with iambic pentameter.
Well, I don't think we would know whether or not it could be done until somebody tried it. As it turned out, it doesn't work.
Doesn't work.
George Bush is still in power.
Yeah, but you were the guy.
I did my best.
Yeah. And then the other thing is that you're the only guy that I know of who choice of who should run for president or be president is dominated by your hope for a candidate with great rhymability, if there is such a word. I mean, nobody else is doing that.
No, and I think they should. I think that that it's destroying the country. These people who insist on running for public office without having names that can rhyme. My candidate in '92, of course, was Ross Perot.
Oh, yes.
A wonderfully iambic man. Little buggy, but quite iambic, and also the O rhymes with a million different things. John McCain is the same way.
That's good. Well, he'll probably run.
He'll probably run. Yeah.
That'll give you an easy one on
the fact that he's
side.
now kowtowing to Jerry Falwell makes me think he's probably going to run.
He's ready to go.
Why else would anybody do that?
I don't know. But there is one example in here of a person who was tough to rhyme on page 50, a poem about the appointment of Alberto Gonzales.
Yes, the Bush Attorney General. That poem goes, "The AG's to be one Alberto Gonzales, dependable, actually loyal über alles. Though we can't say viva for him on Geneva, conventions he'd treat as quite obsolete. The fact he's not Ashcroft does bring us some solace."
That was hard. That one. I mean, the uber alles.
You never know with these guys. I mean, who would have thought that Condoleezza Rice's name fit perfectly in the meter of the March of the Siamese Children from The King and I?
Oh my!
Condoleezza Rice, she's precise. Blah, 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 blah.
That's amazing. Yeah. That's amazing. That's kind of like a gift.
Yeah, I'm not saying he should have chosen her for that reason, but it's certainly a bonus.
The other thing about George W. is that I think it's fair to say that he does take care of, quote, his people, unquote. For example, Nanny Dick. Nanny Dick has certain TV requirements, which
this is a poem called On the revelation that Dick Cheney requires the television to be preset to Fox News in any hotel room he's about to occupy. Some of the titles get a bit long.
So there were poems in the last collection where, as I recall, the title was longer than the poem.
Yeah.
But
That's not true in this case, but it is in some of these poems. The networks give... This is Cheney speaking and explaining why.
Mm-hmm.
The networks give Bush knocks on or mocks. They paint him stubborn as an ox and clever as a box of rocks. So set the channel, please, to Fox. Some commentators on the box like making us the laughing stocks. Upon foul PBS, a pox. Just set the channel, please, to Fox.
That's tough, a pox.
The CNN will broadcast crocs on Arabs managing our docks and deaths and wars and other shocks. Now set the channel, please, to Fox. For me, the news that really rocks confirms beliefs held by our flocks. My mind remains quite closed with locks. So set the channel, please, to Fox.
There's only one line in that poem that I'm not sure rings true. I mean, you're saying that Cheney says these things.
Well, it's
yeah. I mean,
sort of in his mind. I didn't actually speak to him about this.
Oh, you didn't?
No.
Well, okay. Because for me, the news that really rocks, I have difficulty.
Oh, I see. Because you think that he wouldn't use that phrase.
No, I think it's the phrase of dopers and things like that.
Well, younger people usually than Cheney.
The guys that produce radio programs,
Seems younger, yeah.
say things like that a lot.
Engineers and stuff. Yeah.
Now, on the hopeful side, there was Harriet Myers, and much maligned.
She was much maligned, but she gave a lot of loyalty back to him, and I wrote a cheer for her.
Could we end this segment with your leading that cheer, please?
Sure.
Yeah.
Who's willing to draw water for George Bush and carry it? Harriet. Who worked to take his DWI rap and bury it? Harriet. Who thinks anyone critical of him is Judas Iscariot? Still Harriet.
Rah. That's powerful stuff. Powerful stuff. A heck of a job. It reaches deep and develops intimacy. You don't believe that? Stay tuned.
You're listening to Conversations on the Coast with Jim Foster. Now you can find this program on iTunes, SoundCloud, and all your favorite digital outlets. Follow the show on Twitter at JimFosterCoc and email JimFosterCoc@gmail.com.
More of the Bush administration in rhyme. That's the subtitle to this book. And the title is A Heck of a Job. The author, Calvin Trillin, the publisher, our friends at Random House. And there are some poems in here in which you get terribly close to the present. I'm just surprised that you were able to do this. There's one called Hunky Dory in Iraq. Now, that doesn't sound terribly personal, but it's a song sung in the shower every morning by George W. Bush. Wow.
It's all just hunky-dory in Iraq. Yes, thanks to us, they've got their country back. We showed the folks who thought our nerve would crack and folks who were reluctant to attack. Those girly men like Schroeder and Chirac. Yes, things are hunky-dory in Iraq. La-di-da, la-di-da, la-di-da.
That's very good in the morning, that la-di-da, la-di-da.
Yeah.
It's got a wonderful way to start the day.
Yeah, get you sort of wound up.
Yeah,
the day.
Yeah. But the la-di-da guy can be very, very tough. And there's a poem here that just the title suggests toughness. George W. Bush, the Lion of Baghdad, demands that Syria withdraw from Lebanon.
Yeah,
that's an action guy.
I like thinking of him as the Lion of Baghdad, too, George Bush.
That's very nice.
That one says, you must withdraw, since nations can't install their troops in other places to change regimes that they don't like, except, of course, in certain cases.
We know those cases. We know that. There is one on the opposite page, which I wrote a note next to it. it kind of, in an unfortunate way, suggests where we are today to some extent. Cheney says Iraqi insurgents are in final throes.
Dick's always sure he knows what warfare is, enough to know it's not for him or his. Insurgents somehow, though they're in the throes, kill more GIs, but no one Cheney knows.
And that's a very serious point, and it is, unfortunately, a cornerstone of this foreign policy, a cornerstone of how we got in and why we're so damn reluctant to get out.
Well, it's nobody known to anybody in the administration who's fighting the war, and they all happen to be, or virtually all of them, by chance, draft dodgers.
What are the names you have for Cheney? Is
5 Deferment Dick.
There's something peculiar about the 5th deferment.
Well, the 5th deferment came when it was announced that married men, Cheney was then married and had a deferment available for married men, would no longer be deferred unless they had children. And 9 months and 2 days later, they had a child, which I thought was family planning at its very best.
Boy, oh boy. I haven't heard anything as sure as that since the angel Gabriel.
Right. Actually, when there was talk about withdrawing, when Representative Murtha,
yes,
former Marine, said we should withdraw, there's a poem here called Cheney Speaking from Experience. When shells fall close and smoke is thick, real tough guys never run, they stick, or so says 5 Deferment Dick. No wavering, no, he's a brick. To cut and run would make him sick, or so says 5 Deferment Dick. Appeasers cannot take a lick, but tough guys bite and gouge and kick, or so says 5 Deferments Dick.
Wow. I'd like to get back to the president himself. We've suggested that he, has a light moment at the beginning of the morning, la-di-da-da in the shower. He's tough, and he's also prayerful. And a president who listens to a higher authority tells us about that.
This is about his, I guess you'd call, religiosity and rigidity, which somehow comes together in a lot of people. He can't remember one mistake. He'll stay on course till Hades freezes. How can he be so certain still? Because he's got the word from Jesus. In meetings of his White House staff, unquestioning commitment pleases, since human doubts mean nothing to a man who's got the word from Jesus. He treats his critics in the press as if they're yapping Pekingeses. Reporters deal in mundane facts. This man has got the word from Jesus. He can't believe that you'd support the sort of man who eats French cheeses when you can vote to keep in place a man who's got the word from Jesus.
Now, most of these poems appeared in The Nation magazine as part of your job there as one of the highest paid poets in the history of the world. But a very long one with 9 stanzas appeared, I believe, in the New York Times?
Yes, in the op-ed page of the New York Times. It was called The War in 9 Stanzas.
Could you share some of stanza 9 with us?
Sure. The weapons that we went to war to get have not, as Bush might say, been found just yet. And even Bush no longer seeks to blame Iraq for when the towers were aflame. You needn't have clairvoyance to intuit this war's against a man who didn't do it. The man who did is laughing up his sleeve as parents of our fallen soldiers grieve. Although we live in color-coded dread, this war has made us safer, Bush has said. Most voters like the way he's fought the terror, and Bush, when asked, could not recall one error.
The voice is Calvin Trillin. The book, A Heckuva Job, More of the Bush Administration in Rhyme. This has been Conversations on the Coast, and I'm Jim Foster.
Now you can find this program on iTunes, SoundCloud, and all your favorite digital outlets. Follow the show on Twitter at JimFosterCoc and email JimFosterCoc@gmail.com.